Sabrina Salvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. Hello, and happy Sunday, guys. Welcome to Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. I have a great panel lined up tonight. I think Delilah may come in a little bit later, but I want to go ahead and give everyone a chance to introduce themselves. So let's go ahead and get started with Kim.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? I'm Kim Brown. I'm the host of Burn It Down with Kim Brown on YouTube. It is a safe space where we set oppression ablaze because every additional day in this capitalist hellscape is proving to us that we need to burn all the systems down and start anew. So hello, and thank you, Sabby, for having me.
Thanks so much for coming on. And Zainab?
Hey guys, I am Zainab Day. I am just here to chat with you guys tonight. And I am right now I'm working with helping to organize Camp Dada. So that's what I'm doing is my volunteer work right now. And I'm loving that. And yeah, just happy to chat with you guys.
Awesome. So tonight we're going to talk about inflation and how we've been affected by it. And I also want to make a connection here to Roe v. Wade, the new Supreme Court decision overturning Roe v. Wade, because I do feel the two are connected, especially in reference to finances for people having an abortion. But I do want to go ahead and start with this video here. So Joe Biden was recently questioned about the gas prices that all of us are dealing with right now. And they were asking him, why do we have high gas prices right now? Who's to blame? And I want to go ahead and play that because I want to show you what he had to say about that. So let me go ahead and share that screen. Of course, as you can imagine, he is putting the blame elsewhere, but here we go.
If we do these things, it's estimated we could bring down tomorrow, if Congress agreed and the states agreed, we could bring down the price of oil about $1 a gallon at the pump in that range. And so we could have immediate relief in terms of the reduction of the elimination of temporary elimination of the gas tax. And so I think there's a lot of things we can do and we will do, but the bottom line is, ultimately, the reason why gas prices are up is because of Russia. Russia. The reason why the food crisis exists is because of Russia. Russia not allowing grain to get out of Ukraine. And if we do these.
Okay, so that was that. I want to go ahead and welcome Delilah. Delilah, can you go ahead and introduce yourself to everyone, and then we'll get into that video.
Hello. Sorry, thanks for having me. Delilah Barrios here from Texas, running for governor on the Green Party ticket. Hi.
Welcome.
Delilah.
So, thoughts? Open it up to the panel.
I mean, Joe Biden is obviously running for stand-up comedian in chief. To blame Russia and not the oligarchs and not these oil and gas companies that are exploiting the situation that America has created here. Like, America has placed these sanctions on Russia, endangering the move, the free trade, the global trade of grain and food supply. And in addition to Russian gas, which, by the way, the U.S. consumes relatively very little Russian gas. So it's kind of rich that the Biden administration is placing the onus of the blame on Russia, when in fact it's Exxon, when in fact it's BP. It is all of these oil companies that are exploiting our current economic situation in order to maximize profits. And while Biden had some comment about that, I don't know if you guys saw today the comments from Jeff Bezos. He was quickly rebuked by his billionaire overlord, saying, listen, Joey, we paid good money for that White House seat. You cannot be talking crazy to the corporate class and to those that are extracting not only profits, but continue to filthily extract fossil fuels out of the ground. I think it's really rich. And I think we're hearkening back to Red Scare tactics, where Russia, back in the Cold War days, Russia was the boogeyman. Russia was the blame for all. Russia has not held a gun to the head of the Biden administration, demanding that they send $70 billion worth of aid to Ukraine. No, Russia is not the problem here. The problem is inept leadership, starting at the very top. And truthfully, it would not even matter if we had a Republican in office, because with Joe Biden in office, we have seen some of, as we're here to discuss today, the highest inflation. We're involved in a proxy war with Russia, and we're also experiencing record high costs in other areas. So I think it's rich that Biden blames Putin and not himself, and not democratic policies, and not, most importantly, the oil and gas companies, at least when it comes to gas prices, as to why things are so high. It's very easy, Joe Biden.
Yep. Delilah.
Yeah, it's hard to really add to that. You know, he's definitely, when you think about the military industrial complex and you think about the people putting their money into these sort of things, it's always the oil and gas industry that's heavily invested, and they have one of the largest footprints, you know. And so any attempt for him to just hilariously blame, you know, like Russia versus NATO for the things that they're doing, or, you know, socialism and communism versus capitalism is very hypocritical. And I'm just happy to be hearing people talk truth to that, because I'm so tired of, like, Biden's doing a good job. Where? How do you mean? Like, and then the conversation falls flat. But you know what I'm saying? It's like, this guy, he's terrible. I see no benefit to him being in office.
Exactly. I want to add, for people who are not aware, Delilah's opponent, Mr. Beto O'Rourke, also takes money from Exxon. So there's that. Zineb, how do you feel about all this?
Good point about Beto. A lot of people think he's progressive because he rides around on a skateboard and he's all like cool and gets up on chairs and like does rants, but no, not so much. He's another corporate candidate, you know. The $801 billion budget that was written in, if you go and you read that massive war budget that was passed, there's language in there literally. The Democrats wanted to start a war with Russia. The Republicans wanted to start a war with China, but you know, they both wanted to with both. And so we're seeing this ramp up with Ukraine, but they told us 6 months before this even happened, because they passed it in that massive war budget. They passed basically subsidies for they're subsidizing, they're giving welfare to the military industrial complex. And at the end of the day, when I hear him talk about this and blaming oil prices and blaming that, I'm like, you know, he wants us to give Ukraine more money, because he's going to blame it on Russia. And I agree with Kim 100%. It reminds me of Cold War conversations that I heard when I was a kid, you know. It reminds me of that kind of rhetoric we heard up until the late 90s and early 2000s. Then it kind of tapered off, and now it's back. I mean, I feel like we could just replace Putin with Gorbachev, and we're having the same dang conversations. And Joe Biden sounds exactly like Ronald Reagan, blaming the prices on Iran, blaming the prices on Iraq, blaming the prices on Russia, instead of the fact that those countries, we're the ones putting sanctions on them. We're actually the ones hurting the people in those countries, not the governments, the people.
Agreed. I want to talk about like how inflation has been affecting all of us. I think gas is probably one of the largest concerns right now, because I actually put I've never been a filler upper. I'm not a full tank person. I've never been a full tank person. I never fill up all the way.
Oh my gosh.
But I put $10 gas in my car. The needle barely moved. I already had to put gas in again yesterday. That's almost gone. Like I'm trying not to drive far. Like, to be honest,
what's the average price per gallon there in the Boston area, Sabby, for gas?
Depending on which gas station you go to, some places it's like $4.80. Some places it's like $5.
Jeez Louise.
Depends. It depends on where you go from. And so a lot of us, we commute. And if you're living, I'd say 15, 20 minutes outside of Boston, you're spending a lot of money driving into the city. And not everyone can take public transportation because we don't have public transportation everywhere here like we should. It's not like New York. It's not like New York has the train that goes to New Jersey and the one that goes to Connecticut and stuff like that too. It's not like that here. So public transportation is limited. So a lot of people have to end up driving. Some people still don't feel safe taking public transportation after the pandemic. So there's that aspect to it too. So gas is high. Then you have to pay for parking. It's crazy. It's ridiculous. But for those of you, Delilah, you're a parent. I'm wondering what it's like, because like for me, it's just me and my husband. I can't imagine what it's like for people right now that have kids, especially people that have babies, and we have a baby formula shortage.
Oh my God. Yeah, there's so much to touch on. Just briefly, like the public transportation problem is, we have that here too. It's pretty bad, and a lot of people like have big trucks, tractors, and things like that. So they're definitely hurting. I've honestly seen a few more news reports of like, people being aggressive in the gas stations because they can't afford the fuel, which is probably some level of like, propaganda. But I digress. It's as a mom, so I have 3 kids, and I just got off a 24-hour call yesterday. I'm working a lot. It's been hard. Just all the other parents are like, everything's so expensive, and food and fuel and everything. I'm really fortunate that I get to work close to where I live, so my commute's not that bad. But the prices of gas are up there too, even for Texas. And we do so much resource extraction here. You would think it'd be a lot less expensive, but it isn't. They're just taking advantage right now of the situation, and they're raking in as much profit as possible. And I honestly feel that it's a highlight to the root of the problem, which is they control the markets, and they are the ones who get to profit, and they're the ones, like, I feel like they know, especially with Biden, doing more leases into the Gulf and things like that for pipelines and extractions. I think they know that it's a limited resource, and they don't care what cost and what damage happens. And they're just going to see as much profit they can squeeze out of us as possible. And I think it would be really nice to see people come together to kind of like combat that, because unless we do something, it's almost like we're giving consent for all of this crap that we didn't sign up for.
Yep. Zainab?
Well, I was thinking about, there's this saying that we always had childcare poor because childcare is so expensive. I was just reading that it is, 18% of single family homes. That's sorry, that's the wrong one. Childcare has gone up, and parents are now paying, 51% of parents are saying they pay at least 20% of their household income. And anywhere between 10 to 20%, 72% of parents are reporting that they pay between 10 and 20% of their household income. And if you think about rents going up, if you think about the fact that corporations are buying up homes, millennials can't buy homes, Most of us have student debt, and those are about to come due again August 31st, right? What are we going to do? And then on top of that, gas prices, and Sabby, what you said about commuting, that's people in rural areas commute, people in cities commute, and then you have to drive through lights. You often have to sit in traffic, and that's spending more gas. And then we pay 35% in taxes on top of. So if you look at 20% for childcare, 35% for taxes, 10% to 15% for student loans, what's left over to buy food?
Essentials. Yeah.
What are we doing? We don't. And then people are paying 30 to 40 to 50% of their income for rent. Once you add up the percentages, you're not making enough. And I think about, the overturning of Roe v. Wade, and I think about single parents because, childcare is a mythology. Like getting a child care from the absent parent for single moms, that doesn't happen. Like when we know somebody that gets child support, we're like, girl, you're lucky, because we really don't get it. I raised my daughter by myself while I was in college. I've gotten, I think, $300 in childcare her entire life, and she's 12 years old. So like the government doesn't really do anything to help us. Welfare isn't a thing. SNAP benefits, food stamps are impossible to get. And then if you do get help, like a TANF program or something like that, that's the transitional work program. You have to work at the DMV or somewhere like that for 20 to 30 hours a week for less than minimum wage once you average out how much money the government's giving you, because they're giving you like $200 to $300 a month. So that's why some of them people at the DMV are so moody, y'all. It's because they're single mamas or single parents up there working, and they basically give you what your child support would be, and then they go after the absent parent for it. But it's broken. We don't have resources that our parents had. They had subsidized childcare. They had, you guys remember like the good government cheese and the good government, I don't know if y'all remember that, but the good,
I don't know how good it was, Zainab.
Right? They
was
made
there.
the best grilled cheese sandwiches. But we were able to our parents were able to at least get something, even though we were really poor. We had at least a little bit of help. They had childcare so that my mama could work. We don't have that anymore. And schools were subsidizing state and state universities and colleges at 80%. Now they're subsidized at 11%. That's why they could go to school and pay off their student loans, because it was subsidized. So they've really pushed us into a corner where we can't raise our families anymore.
That's right. Kim?
The place that I'm experiencing inflation pain is really when it comes to food costs. I don't drive, so I'm not experiencing gas price pain the same way that everybody else is. I do feel guilty for asking people for rides without some snaps on the petro. And before, back in the day, you could slip somebody $5, $10, and that would be sufficient, as ride money. But nope, I think you need to be coming with at least $20 a dub or greater with these inflation costs. But when it comes to food, I mean, the amounts that I'm spending on food as a single person are pretty absurd. And for the stuff that I like to eat, like produce and like vegetables and fruit, usually around this time, spring, summer, you'll start to see some seasonal produce sales. It's picking season for fruit. I've not seen no such sales. I've seen very little price breaks on fruits and vegetables. And of course, everybody knows the astronomical prices of for those who consume meat. If you eat chicken, especially if you eat beef, it's pretty much sticker shock. And that is what concerns me for people who are disabled, for our elderly people, for single mothers who are on fixed incomes. I mean, as these other costs, the cost of living, rent, gasoline, transport, childcare, all these things continue to skyrocket, what are people going to have left over to literally eat? And all the complaints and all the historical mythology in this country surrounding socialism and communism. Oh, they have food lines. Well, we have food lines here too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right in the heart of capitalism. So I think it's been past time for the United States to make a different decision, because this system is not helping everybody. It is only helping a very small number of elites at the top. And I think the situation is becoming so dire for the lower 99%. I don't see how revolution doesn't happen. I don't see how some sort of mass revolt I mean, we can start off on a civil disobedience level with the general strike, and that's cute. But we know with all these billions going back towards the police state, they intend to use those weapons on somebody, right? And likely it's going to be us if we make more than just a little protest or a big protest, as it were. But anyway, all the money is being reinforced to law enforcement and to the military. Very little is done to being helped the actual people. And especially what you guys have already talked about in the wake of this Roe v. Wade decision being overturned. You're going to force women to bring children into the world where there's no baby formula on the shelves, where there's no child tax care credit to be availed. And more importantly, with Black and brown women who are more likely going to be bearing the burden of abortion rights going away are probably going to experience higher rates of maternal mortality while they are pregnant and after they give birth. So we don't have access to healthcare in this system, in this country. So, I mean, there's so many cascading factors that are happening. They're really turning into a tsunami at this point and putting so much pressure on the people that I think either we're going to break or we are going to bust. And I mean, bust the system upside its head wide open. That's what I mean.
Agreed. I think that another thing too, I actually turned down a job offer because originally I was going through a temp agency, and originally they told me that it would be 2 days on site and 3 days remote.
Mm-hmm.
Then after that, they were like, okay, yeah, they really like you. Like, oh yeah, it's 5 days on site. And I was like, yeah, I can't afford the gas to get there. And they said, well, surely there's something we can work out. I was like, no, really, there isn't. Like, I would literally be working to get to work, just to go like back and forth to work. I'm like, how much that's going to cost me in gas. And so I wonder too, for a lot of people, these recruiters that are trying to fill these positions, I wonder if they're having a difficult time filling some of these positions because those companies, they want some of the people to come back and be fully in the office now and not fully remote as we were before. And I wonder if they're having a difficult time recruiting people because right now, like if you live, like I said, you live 15, 20 minutes outside of Boston, it's going to be expensive for you to drive. You got to pay for the gas. You got to pay to park. In some places, it's like $10 a day for parking. So that's on top of the gas. And that's why I'm telling people like, this is absolutely horrible. So I know people like cannot afford to even drive to work because of the gas prices. But I'm glad you brought the connection into Roe v. Wade as well. I did just see this morning, a 10-year-old girl in Ohio. Ohio was one of the states that was affected by the trigger law. So she cannot have an abortion in Ohio because she was 6 weeks, 3 days, I believe. This was a result of sexual assault. I just want to put that out there for people wondering. 10-year-old girl pregnant in Ohio, and they have to take her to Indiana to get an abortion because Ohio was one of the trigger states. And again, that's why I'm saying, like, I think it was a huge mistake to turn it back over to the states. But then what is the cost for her to get from Ohio to Indiana?
Well, hold on. What about in the case of rape or incest? See, this is what's such bullshit about all of these abortion laws, because how does a 10-year-old credibly prove that they were raped or incest, aside from the fact that the 10-year-olds come up pregnant, right? Like I thought that was supposed to be these exceptions. And that is the part of the issue with these exceptions is how do you prove that you were raped? Do you have to prove it through the legal justice system? Do you have to name an accuser? Does that put the child, the survivor of this abuse somehow in danger? Does the person, the pregnant person now have to wait for the court system to play itself out to prove that they were raped or the victim of incest? Like it's so misogynistic and it's so cruel, deliberately cruel to women and girls and people who can become pregnant. It's abhorrent. I'm gonna let somebody talk, but that I saw that, Sabby, and I was beside myself with fury because I said, where are the laws protecting this child? Where are those laws protecting this child? She should have access to health care, and it's traumatic to force a child to give birth at 10 years old, but this is the fascism that
a 10-year-old, she could die.
Yeah.
No, that's true. That's kind of why I've been so mad. And like, we lost abortion access in November or last year. We lost it under Biden, of course. And yeah, that's part of the issue, is that people become pregnant against their consent. You know, you've got minors, children who are victims of assault, and they're being punished to carry unnecessarily longer. And even people who want to have babies and are looking forward to becoming mothers are still limited and still brutalized and still forced to suffer and being punished just for being women. There's a lady, I don't know if you all saw it, I sent you a link. She's like a makeup artist. Her name's Marlena, and she just moved from Washington to Texas and ended up miscarrying. And her process was incredibly painful for her. She had to have 2 ultrasounds, even after verifying that there was no life left in, inside. And she's like traumatized from it. So it doesn't matter the circumstances. It doesn't matter. And that's really the whole issue. Is like, this is why it's a patient privacy issue. This is why it's not just a women's rights issue. It's like all rights issues. Because I feel like trans people are just as likely to be harmed by this type of like legislation that seeks to punish people and harm them for their own personal lifestyle choices or things that they may or may not have control over. So,
and would you want to go get
fascism.
a pap smear if you knew that, if you took a test, would you even want to go in and get a pap smear? Because then you're going to be tracked if that was positive, and then you're going to have to pick up those costs because they will charge you. And so it's going to keep women from even going in and getting tested, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
Right.
And then it brings up the point to private healthcare, because a lot of people want more privatized healthcare. And that's unfortunate because it boxes out people who can have access to it financially. So not only before SB 8, anybody who was poor would have struggle accessing the medications that they needed or the healthcare that they needed. And now it's just worse. I mean, I think that the healthcare sector alone is a great indicator for how awful things really are, because we got pushed to our limits with COVID, like the staff, the hospitals, the supplies, all of that. And it is unsustainable completely and fully to keep proceeding down this path where capitalism, it rules all. There's, your body is not worth anything more than the labor it creates. And it's just, there's no way that it's possible. Like, I honestly, genuinely fear for the next 5 years for any patient, because I don't want to be a patient. I know what it's like. I see it in and out. I'm there. I mean, it's bad. It's really, really bad. And people are understandably very stressed and what are we supposed to do?
Right. This is the tweet that Delilah is referring to. So Marlena went through a similar situation that Lauren Ashcraft went through. And I talked to you guys about this last week. She said, I wanted my baby. My husband and I have tried for years. I got pregnant in August 2021 and then miscarried. My body doesn't naturally expel, so I needed a D&C. I was denied one because my doctor was worried about the laws here in Texas. I waited for 2 weeks carrying my loss while hoping I didn't go septic. My pain got worse and I was scared. I begged to get a D&C and was told no, because politicians who have no right to butt into my healthcare needs decided their say was more important than mine. And so she said, instead of allowing me to grieve my loss, I had to fight for 2 weeks to get care, which I eventually got at an abortion clinic and not a hospital. The clinic gave me the care I was denied by the doctors. And while entering the clinic, I was yelled at and told I was a baby killer from total strangers who didn't even know why I was there or what I was going through, because these strangers thought their opinions mattered more than my own health and well-being. And then she puts up this one here, and here's my 2-year-old baby girl who has her mom still alive because I fought to get the care I needed. I will not let a government decide whether or not I can get care. I need to stay healthy and alive. And that's the picture of her and her daughter there. And this goes back to, again, Lauren Ashcraft, similar situation. She shared it on Twitter. The problem is that now, because of those trigger laws, in some of those states, that procedure that she needed to get is now illegal.
And I'll just add that procedure is used for a lot of things, and they don't even understand the full scope of the medical practice. They should have no right saying what kind of procedures are being done. They don't even understand reproduction. Like, we're letting these bigots tell us what we can and cannot do with our bodies with impunity. And people, so that's the thing. What are we supposed to do? We're supposed to die. We are supposed to lose our lives for to uphold their belief system. How corrupt is that?
Well, in addition, I know you guys have probably heard about some states. I think South Carolina is one of them that is considering legislation that would make it illegal for pregnant people to leave the state to go seek abortion care, which you want to talk about infringing upon bodily autonomy. Now you want to infringe upon what kind of medical proceedings and healthcare that people can seek outside of a state in which is restrictive. I mean, just think about that, the implications of that. If somehow, if it were illegal to seek cancer treatments in a different state, or here where I live in the DC, Maryland and Virginia area, if I'm a resident of Maryland and my doctor or the place I'm seeking care is in DC, is that somehow going to become illegal? Like, these are the kinds of things that Congress and this White House need to be putting their heads down and getting to effing work right away on this kind of thing. Because if we restrict people's freedom of movement for them to go seek health care, I mean, how is that different from slavery? I mean, in some form of restricted movement for people, are we going to start asking people for papers? Like, how does this, like, where is the end of this horrible rabbit hole? Where does this deposit us at? And it deposits us in a horrific place. But I'm encouraged and somewhat disappointed in some cases that, you know, Black and brown women have been subjected to, you know, the government interference in our bodies, in our autonomy, and in our healthcare, really since the inception. And I'm happy to see white women getting upset about this and organizing around this. But if people had taken this same sort of prioritization into Black and brown women's bodies, maybe we would not have ended up here at all.
Agreed. And I want to show people another connection here with Roe v. Wade and inflation and how it affects the economy, because this is something I don't think a lot of people were aware of. Now, this is from CNN Business. The economic consequences of overturning Roe v. Wade will be enormous. And that was a warning from experts before the overturn happened. So it says that taking away a woman's right to choose if and when she has a child has serious consequences for her career and economic circumstances. Roe v. Wade, last week, Treasurer Secretary Janet Yellen told lawmakers during a hearing that restricting women's reproductive rights would have very damaging effects on the economy. Roe v. Wade and access to reproductive health care, including abortion, helped lead to increased labor force participation. It enabled many women to finish school. That increased their earning potential. It allowed women to plan and balance their families and careers. Last year, and Delilah, this is first to your state, after Texas lawmakers moved to effectively ban abortion in the state, 154 economists filed an amicus brief with the Supreme Court in support of maintaining reproductive freedoms in the United States so that women can realize their full economic and educational potential. So this is another thing where I look at people like Bill Gates right now. He said he's concerned that there is a childbirth decline in the United States, and that has to be related to labor. They want you to have these babies because they want people in the workforce, in the labor force. And right now, if you look at Gen Z, a lot of them are not having kids, do not want kids. And some of that has to do with student loan debt, right? And then you look at even millennials, my generation, some of us are not having kids. So there's been a steady decline of childbirths in the United States. And I think a lot of it comes back to capital. So they're saying we need you to have these babies so that we have people to work for us down the line. But at the same time, this is still causing economic issues by telling women that they can't, have the right to choose, because now you're making women, you're forcing them to have a child and you're preventing them from actually having that opportunity to advance in the workplace and to take on other work, responsibilities if they want to. Because the reality is this: if you're a single parent, and like Zainab said, a lot of times the father or the other parent is not in the picture, or they're not helping and taking care of the child the way that they should be. So what does that mean? Like, what do you do for your child if you have to pay for childcare? How are you paying for it if you only have one income? Because daycare is expensive. So it's a lose-lose situation. It's really not good. You're bringing kids into the country, into this world, but they don't have the resources that they need to have a decent life. And I think that's the piece that's missing a lot of times.
Well, they want to keep us poor, Sabby, so that they can get cheap labor. If we excel too much, if we get that tuition-free college, if we're sending our kids out to be doctors and to be lawyers, then they're going to be competing with what, Nick from RBN talks about, the managerial class, and I talk about that too. Upper middle class people want it secured for their children. They believe, it's people that it's generational poverty versus generational wealth, right? It's a caste system. We live in a caste system, and they want us to be held down, people from generational poverty, because they believe that's where we're supposed to be. They worked hard to get their kids advancements. Let's not talk about redlining. Let's not talk about land grants. Let's not talk about, privileges that were given to white people instead of people of color, and to white people over immigrants. Let's not talk about any of that, but it is a matter of them wanting a workforce in order to uphold their lives. And I think now that prices are going up and now that workers are demanding, they're afraid they're going to have to pay more. They're afraid that they're going to have to pay more to have that gardener come in and do their front lawn. They're afraid that they're going to have to pay more to have somebody come in and clean out the refrigerator and sweep their floors. And I think that's part of it. I don't know if you guys have ever seen the movie Metropolis, but I've been thinking about that a lot lately. It's an old 1920s film that was done, during the 20s boom with the Rockefellers and all of them. People lived underground and they kept the rich people above, they kept them housed, they kept them comfortable, they kept the fountains going, and they lived bougie, and that's really what our society is. But they keep us comfortable enough sometimes where people don't fight. But and Josan always talks about this. We're comfortable enough just not to fight. But I think that where we're headed right now is extreme. Some of us have already lived that extremities, but a lot more people are going to be living that extremity, and it's starting to filter into the middle class.
I just wanted to bring up one thing. I think that's all true, and I think that better class awareness is like the right direction to go. But I also wanted to bring up, we just talked about that 10-year-old girl that's potentially being forced to carry. Who knows how long, poor thing. Children, like, we're the human capital stock, right? We refer to as such, at least essential workers were. We're the human capital stock. That's what we are. Our worth is our values, our labor, and it's exploited. And that's the only reason why we're allowed to have any quote unquote freedoms. But babies, children, there's a system, a capitalistic system that makes a lot of money off of selling babies. And this forced labor sentencing to our generations is a way to help bring profits to that industry. So if you think about it that way, and anybody that's like, oh, I'm pro-life, you don't understand what you're saying. You know what I'm saying? What you're saying is that you want people to be miserable and unhappy, and you want babies to have a price tag on them. And that is what people really need to consider when they're saying, oh, well, they don't feel comfortable talking about abortion, or they don't feel comfortable. In this state, if they have put a bounty on people's heads, basically. If you're helping somebody can turn you in and they can get paid $10,000. A lot of people still are unaware of that fact in the state. And it's like, I don't know how, I'm going to lose my voice just like shouting so much, it's a lot. But I wanted to bring that up because I didn't know people were aware how much money is involved in the adoption industry. It's a lot.
Yep. Yeah. One thing, I'm gonna pass it to you real quick, Kim, but one thing I wanted to add too, connecting the two, inflation and the overturn of Roe v. Wade, women who are poor and women who are working class, they're the ones that are affected the most by this decision, this Supreme Court decision. It was already difficult for them to afford to have an abortion in the first place. Now you add inflation on top of that, it's going to be damn near impossible for them to be able to afford to have one. So what I tell people in reference to what should we do, don't donate to the Democrat politicians. I know they're hitting people up. They text me like as soon as the decision was announced, they hit me up too. Don't donate to those Democrat politicians, because Nancy Pelosi and the rest of them, they have endorsed and they've donated money to anti-choice Democrat politicians. If they were serious about it, they could have handled this under Obama, under Clinton, under Carter, and codified Roe v. Wade into law. They did not on purpose. Donate your money to an abortion fund, because that's what these women are going to need right now. I don't know who's going to help this 10-year-old little girl, because it's not like she is old enough to work or have an income. So I don't know who's paying for this. I don't know where the money's going to come from, but you need to donate your money to an abortion fund. And I'm going to pass it to Kim.
Yeah, the overturning of Roe v. Wade is as much a healthcare issue as it is a class issue. As you just said, Sabby, it's going to be poor women who are going to be disproportionately affected by this. And on our channel, Burn It Down with Kim Brown, every month we're going to be highlighting a local, on the ground, grassroots abortion fund that we're going to be encouraging our supporters and our viewers to support. And we're going to start in abortion restrictive states, the states in which the trigger laws have already taken place, because our resident journalist who covers reproductive justice on Burn It Down with Kim Brown, her name is Molly Shaw. Molly has been reporting about this for The Real News, and she's talked to different abortion funds all over the country, and roughly they estimate it costs about $1,200 per client for transportation, for lodging, for food, for childcare, to move or go from a abortion restrictive state to Illinois or to Maryland or to New York in order to access abortion services. And, wealthier people, more financially comfortable people are not going to feel these same costs and financial challenges in the same way. So this is absolutely a class issue. So regardless of what anyone's potential moral hangup around abortion could be, if you believe in class struggles, this is absolutely a class struggle for Black and brown women. But getting back to the birth dearth, as it were, in this country, one of my many acts of resistance, of personal resistance that nobody pays attention to, but I know I do it. I have not become a parent with some intentionality. I look at, number one, we're not incentivized to become parents in the US. We don't have universal parental leave. We don't have access to universal health care. Children are sent, at least in certain places around the country, are sent into learning environments where they are taught that they are inferior and have environmental contaminants in their school buildings and in their school systems. And on top of that, the climate catastrophe that we are facing. I mean, if I were a parent, I would lose sleep at night thinking about, what the planet is going to be looking like in the next 20 or 30 years. So my little act of resistance is I'm not replacing myself in the labor market. That's how I stick it to capitalism. But capitalism sticks it right back to me and says, whoa, well, you are ending your line as an act of protest. And if that's what it's got to be, then that's what it's got to be. But when it comes to women and what Janet Yellen said about women's opportunities, their income earning opportunities or wealth generating opportunities being hampered, America does not give a fuck about you bitches. I mean, the sooner that everybody seems to learn that and internalize that, I think we can start have a better jumping off point as to where we should go. Because even, I guess it was Alito. Was it Alito who cited it in his opinion, when he talked about, the founding fathers made no mention of abortion rights as a constitutional right. They didn't make any mention of women, period. The only time they mentioned Black people was in the context of us being 3/5 of a human. So the fact that we are still holding the so-called founding fathers in this high moral regard, as though they were the literal gods that brought down the stone tablets of the Bill of Rights and the U.S. Constitution. It is a flawed document. It does not include the majority of the people that reside in this country now. And it is meant to just uphold that hierarchy of white male property owners at the top. And this decision is somewhat a reinforcement of that.
Well said, Kim. Well said. Another thing I wanted to bring up. Now, Richard Wolff talked about this. I'm going to go ahead and add this to, because he does two different ones. He did a breakdown about inflation. And a lot of people I've seen are not mentioning this bit. Let me find him. Whoever else wants to, here it is. So he does this thing called economic update. Let me go ahead and share this here. I'm going to share this video because he mentioned something that I think I'm not hearing most people discuss as to why we're in this situation to begin with. That's why I like listening to Richard Wolff in reference to economics, because he usually brings up the silent part. I don't know how else to say it, but he usually does. Okay, so let me mute my mic really quick.
And our hats off to them as we note yet more evidence of a rising labor movement in the United States. I want to talk in my first update about the war in Ukraine, but not actually the war. And so this is not about whatever side on that question you feel you belong. I want to talk about the economics of the sanctions, the effort of the West, led by the United States, to punish, that's the word they use, Russia for the invasion of Ukraine. Much of the impact on the inflation around the world that comes is not coming because of the war. It's coming to us because of the sanctions. And that needs to be understood. The sanctions begin when the United States and Western Europe take some of the financial reserves that Russia uses to support and back up its currency, cuts off trade, cuts off access to airplane travel, cuts off corporations, formally, informally, continuing their operations in Russia. It's a many-sided attack on the economy, basically, of Russia. And this is having consequences, and it's important to understand what they are and why they're there as you think about this war as it continues. And I'm going to give you an example you may not know, just to show you the complexity of this sanction warfare and its consequences. Early on, right after the invasion, the United States, Western Europe begins cutting off access to its airports for Russian airlines. Okay. Predictably, because the Russians said so, there were countermeasures. And one of them involved the Russians not allowing airplanes sitting on runways and sitting in parking lots in Russian airports to leave. Well, those are airlines that the Western companies who own those airlines or who lease them have come to depend on. Those planes have to move if they're going to be used around the world. They can't move. The Russians won't let them. It's a counter sanction. Well, what happens then, just so you get it, is that the airline companies, being damaged by these programs of sanctions on all manner of levels, turn to their insurance companies and say, hey, we pay you an insurance policy to help us, to compensate us for our losses if anything happens to interfere in air traffic. Now there's a big struggle going on between the airlines and the insurers. But the insurers know that sooner or later they're going to have to fork up huge amounts of money because of all the air traffic that isn't happening and causing vast losses to the airlines. That means insurance companies are going to be out of money. And guess what they are? Highly concentrated industry. And if they're losing money in one area, they're raising it in another. That is, rates everywhere are going up, which means every other business that insures itself, which is most businesses, are going to pay higher rates. And you know how they cover themselves when that happens. They raise the prices of what they charge, which is why we have an inflation. It's the sanctions, not the warfare, that is the problem.
Yep.
That's why I love him. I have my kids watch some of his speeches or his, lectures. So
Yeah.
my son was like we were talking about villains, and he's like, oh, but the real villain is capitalism. And I was like, I'm so proud of, like, it's just, I don't know. That's my small part. You know what I'm saying? Like, my kids are smarter than a lot of adults I know. Yeah, I love that he just tells you exactly. He's like, it's this, and he explains it so that you understand it.
Yep.
But this is the first time I think that the US and specifically American citizens have experienced this in this particular way. Like, we are so accustomed to our government placing sanctions on other so-called regimes, on other nations for dubious reasons usually. And this is the time that America did clownery, and the clownery has come back to bite us squarely in the derriere. We place these sanctions on Russia, Russian oil, Russian grain, Russian products. And who is it coming back to hurt? Us. If I'm not mistaken, Russia's not doing too bad economically right now. They still have other buyers on the market for Russian oil. Russian grain is being purchased, or rather being sold, in rubles. I mean, the ruble has not collapsed to the extent I think that the West was hoping that it would collapse. I mean, and Russia's making progress in the war. It doesn't look like Russia's losing this war to me. So it's funny. It's not funny that we are experiencing it, but in the grand scheme of American foreign policy and the harms and the death and destruction in which specifically sanctions, which are violent. I mean, they affect the regular citizens of a given country. The fact that these sanctions have come and bit us is rather ironic. But the problem is, people like Jeff Bezos are not feeling these sanctions. People like Elon Musk are not feeling these sanctions in the same way, tragically, like it does when we put our sanctions other places. The sanctions are boomeranging back to the regular folks, and it's hurting us.
Yep.
That's right. And that's why, like, if you notice some of the other countries that the US has put sanctions on, like Afghanistan, for example, that didn't affect us in this way. But still, another $800 million just went out the door to Ukraine. And it's not just weapons. And I hear people saying that it's not just weapons. I broke this down like a week or two ago and showed people exactly how the money is divided up. They're giving them healthcare. They're not giving all of us healthcare. They're giving them money for food. They're giving them money for clean drinking water. And we have towns. It's not just Flint. We have towns here in the United States that don't have clean drinking water. So they're basically taking care of them right now, but they're not taking care of us.
It's like Israel.
Right. Oh my gosh. The kicker was pensions for the seniors. I said, wait a second. What?
Oh, how nice. That's nice for them. Like, not trying to be petty or jealous, you know what I'm saying? But the fact that there is money to go to other nations, I firmly believe there's a lot of racism going on over there. I don't trust that Zelensky guy. I don't like their battalion. I don't trust Nazis. And so that personally, right? Like, I'm in Green Party. We are hippies, okay? No war. Like, and it's so hard to be peaceful when it's like there's constantly a war being waged against people like me, and it's very like the least I can do is speak to it, you know? But for like most people, we're tired. We're tired of hearing about Ukraine. We're tired of hearing about why it's Russia's fault. We need relief. People in Ecuador went on general strike for 18 days, and they got everything that they needed. It is not beyond our scope, you know what I'm saying, to organize. I just think that there's some like fragility with being vulnerable, but like we all are. I don't understand why people have such a struggle to come to terms with that. Maybe there are people that haven't had to suffer, like, you know. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I don't understand why we're giving money. Okay, we're giving money to Ukraine, right? And it's like you said, it's not this American exceptionalism, American first ideology that I have that we shouldn't be helping people. But why don't we help all these countries that we've ravaged? Why aren't we helping Somalia? Why aren't we down in Africa helping, you know, the people there that we have been taking the resources for ever 400 years. Why aren't we helping the South American countries that we have brought cartels into and ravaged? We're not helping the places that we hurt, but we go to Ukraine where there's Nazis.
Yeah.
I mean, that is the thing that really infuriates me. We're not helping the native people on our own lands. Like the people that we have exploited, that we have directly exploited, we aren't helping.
Yeah.
You know, we don't just owe reparations to Black and brown Americans. We owe reparations to the world. And these corporations owe reparations to the world. Sorry if I'm getting too loud, but that's something I've been thinking about. I'm like, why are we giving so much money to them? Why aren't we giving money to Afghanistan and Iraq? Why aren't we fixing what we did to Iran, where my family's impacted by the sanctions that they put on there? You know, we're not. We're giving money to Ukraine.
I think it's an excuse to have the bloated military budget, to be honest with you. I think this is their excuse. They can say, oh, $750 billion for the Pentagon. But, well, you know, there's this war with Russia and Ukraine. And so we had to have a large budget so we can help out Ukraine. And so there's that. There's the NATO aspect of it. And let's be real, the United States government, they're not trying to help countries where there's people of color, where there's brown people. They're really not. If that were the case, they would have tried to help Yemen a long time ago. They continued to sell arms to Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has pretty much ravaged that country. And only now the U.S. government is coming in and saying, okay, we stand with the people in Yemen. We're going to have to go there. I think Joe Biden should be going there pretty soon, actually, over to Saudi Arabia and Yemen. And now he's saying that we want peace in that area. Well, yeah, because there's nothing else to be gained from it. They've destroyed the country. So it's just, I don't see money going to people in Yemen to help them out. So there's a lot of that. There's a lot of hypocrisy. They don't even try to deal with Saudi Arabia on a international level. When Saudi Arabia does crimes against the United States, which they have, an American journalist was killed in Saudi Arabia, the United States government does nothing to them. And that's because the United States government needs them for oil. So it's like there's so much hypocrisy. And I think, thankfully, due to social media and independent media, I think more Americans are starting to wake up and see it. Like, look, this is ridiculous. We just had a pandemic. It's been 2 years since the pandemic started. People have lost their jobs. People have lost their homes. And you got all this money and you're sending it out the door to another country instead of helping people here.
Well, I mean, and the pandemic is still going on, and we might even be dealing with twin pandemics. I mean, I've been trying intentionally not to sound alarmist around monkeypox, but I keep seeing the case numbers go up, and I don't hear a whole lot of guidance coming from the CDC about what to do to prevent the spread of monkeypox. But when it comes to COVID, I mean, that's another example. Number one, the ways in which the government, the Biden administration specifically, the corporate class, and even the media have been complicit into selling the myth to Americans that we are in a post-COVID status here. And I'm assuring you that across the country, I'm seeing everybody talk about they know so many people who are infected with COVID. And on top of this being a mass casualty event, it is still a mass disability event. And the Biden administration is sending billions overseas, giving billions to police, but yet we have to pay for COVID tests still if you are uninsured. You have to pay for your vaccinations now if you don't have insurance or access to insurance. Those vaccinations and boosters are, at least where around my way, they're about $50 a pop. There's no more money in the COVID fund, but it's amazing that they keep finding money for Ukraine and yet doing very little to address this pandemic, which I'm certain, as you said, Sabby, is still having ongoing economic impacts on the economy. But it's just another glaring example of what our elected leadership has been telling us, with what capitalist leaders have been telling us. You are only good for the labor that you produce. If you don't produce labor, we don't care if you die. If you don't produce children, we don't care if you die. If you don't adhere to this heteronormative, Christo-fascist policies that we are enacting state by state by state, we don't care if you die. And that is a decision that I think is placed squarely at our feet now, like challenge. Like the system has told us, okay, challenge. Like I said on my show all the time, like they are daring us to burn it down. They are daring us. They think we are a bunch of punks, and they think that we won't do it. And I think that on some level, they are potentially right. And part of that, I think, comes with a fear that Americans have that I think maybe does not exist, or maybe not exist as greater levels as they do other places, but definitely here, I know the populace understands that the police will turn the guns on them, particularly black and brown folks. And I think a lot of white moderates and white liberals were, quite frankly, scared by the protests of 2020, because what they experienced was they came out with good intentions, good faith, etc., and they realized that they too will get tear gassed. They too will get hit with rubber bullets. They too will be subjected to police brutality. Like I call my white supporters on Burn It Down with Kim Brown, I call them the John Brown Brigade, but I caution them, don't forget what they did to John Brown, okay? Like there is peril with being a comrade or an ally to marginalized and oppressed people in this country. But I think the more moderate and liberal centrist of the white people found out that nope, you cannot stand with black and brown people and not expect to get violence in return.
That's right. And I have a question for you, Kim, if you don't mind me asking, in reference to disability benefits during this time of inflation, or even let's say even last year during the pandemic, has the U.S. government increased disability benefits?
They did. They increased them a small percentage. The exact percentage sort of eludes me, but I want to say it was possibly between 2 and 4% of a bump in disability benefits, which if it does not match what the rates of inflation in housing. It doesn't match. It just does not keep up. The math does not math with the amount, the cost of living adjustments that people who receive disability benefits were given. I think starting in 2022 or the latter part of 2021. I mean, you might have gotten a bump, but I assure you that bump did not keep up with the cost of food, the cost of gas, and the cost of living and lodging.
Sorry.
And they increased Medicare and Medicaid by 2 to 4%. So they increase disability and they increase Social Security, but then at the same time they increased how much people have to pay into Medicare and Medicaid by the same percentage.
See, that's the other problem is people that are on like the fixed income, not just people that are on disability, but what about people who are retired? You know, that stopped working like years ago. This is why sometimes you see like elderly people have to go back to work.
Sad. It's so sad. And then look at what the stock market losses have been. Now, I'm broke. I don't have no money in the stock market, but my mama's got a 401k, and you know she's not a wealthy woman, not even close. Like she can't afford to be taking $3,000 and $4,000 hits to her pension. And on top of that, the crypto market is collapsing. And like I feel as though all the symbols are there of the pillars of power in all the institutions in this country are falling. So now the onus is on us. How are we going to organize to, number one, bring it all the way down, and number two, the ways in which we are going to build these institutions anew, like from brand new, though. We may not even call them the same things because the old names have such bad vibes. We got to call them new things.
No, that's I mean, that's why I work with people to do general strike organizing, because the more people we can get inspired, the better. That's one of the things that kind of inspired me to even get into politics. Like I worked with so many 60-year-olds that were like, oh, maybe if I don't want to retire and then run out of money before I die. Like that was just a normal thing that they were talking about. It's like, I know people that are retirement age, but they can't retire because they don't have enough for their medical expenses. And so like the quality of living is just going down and down and down. And it's like, I know a lot of people actually feel it at this point. Finally, I don't know a lot of people who are immune to it at this point. I think, when the pandemic hit, there were some people that were kind of covered. And I'm just going to say really quickly, I have children and we filed our tax returns. We usually get something back because we spend so much money on our kids. And because of the child tax credit, we got so much less. And they were like, oh, you don't have to pay it back. Don't worry about it. I wonder if any of those corporations had to give back their PPE loans. Like, what about Pelosi? Did she end up have to suffer for anything that? No. She just gets to buy into things that she has, knowledge for, but the rest of us have to suffer. And they're trying to recoup their losses. they didn't get enough free money. Now these corporations are trying to get every penny they can squeeze out of us. So it's not just the food and the fuel. It's like just the wages aren't going anywhere. I know people that try to survive off $15 an hour, and like, it's not possible. It just isn't. So anyway.
And the unemployment rate isn't accurate either.
Yeah.
And I want people to understand, like, there are certain people that are not included in that unemployment rate, but they are unemployed. It's the way they do the statistics. Like, it's not even accurate. It's higher than they're telling you.
Yeah, and then, people that are on fixed income, Social Security benefits, or disability, I mean, every time something like this happens to our general economy, they're some of the first ones to feel that. Some of our most at-risk people, are feeling that sooner because they only have so much to work with. And I mean, it is such a class struggle. I mean, if not now, when?
No, it's true. I remember, like, when I was growing up, particularly in the 90s, I would say, a lot of times when I went to places like Wendy's or, I don't know, Subway, Burger King, those jobs were typically teenagers. It was teenagers that I saw at the drive-through window. It was teenagers that I saw working those jobs. Now, when I go to those places, adults.
Yeah.
Older adults too. There's a woman that works at the gas station down the street. She's got to be at least probably in her 70s. And it makes me feel some kind of way that somebody should have to work. Like, at that age, standing on your feet all those long hours. Like, I had those jobs before. I know how long you're standing on your feet. When I go into a restaurant and I see people that are like, elderly, and they're waiting tables.
Yeah. This is the country that we live in. And that's why a lot of times I bring it back to class, because I want people to pay attention to this. I want to see more documentaries and more reality shows about what it's like to be poor in this country instead of reality shows about what it's like to be rich. Say that.
Yeah.
Even middle class homes, when I would watch, I remember growing up, and all the houses that were on all the shows, we would always be like, whoa. And my daughter said that to me, and it kind of makes me want to tear up. But she's like, Mom, we would never be able to live in a house like that. And it's just like a 3-bedroom, house. But literally what they paint is like everyday America. To me, is like bougie. And my poor mama, you're talking about retiring. My poor mom, she's 68 years old, and she is doing elder care on her feet all day. And then 2 people were diagnosed with COVID, and my mom's going in, and I'm scared to death that my mama's going to get it at 68, and she makes $9.50 an hour.
This is what people don't understand. And for people who will say, well, move to a state that has a lower cost of living, let me tell you what's happening in those states. People who are wealthy, typically, especially those coming from the tech industry and the startup industry, they're realizing its cost of living is cheaper in those states too. So they're moving to those places and they're gentrifying those areas. And the people who grew up there are now being pushed out. Even in Zeneb's in Kentucky, Louisville. I was reading about this the other day. They're trying to gentrify Louisville and make that more like up and coming. These places that they tell you to go to, it's only a matter of time before other wealthy people or people who are upper middle class move there and also say, hey, I can get a house in North Carolina for like $300,000, a huge home, instead of living here in San Francisco and paying a lot of money in rent. And that's the problem. It's just they just passing that on to another state. It's not really, the problem is not being solved. And there is a solution. But like Zeneb was telling you, like, they don't want people to get out of poverty. They want the people who are in poverty to stay there.
I mean, but when it comes to housing inflation, I think it's time that we start to understand that there are radical strategies that we could take advantage of, because as we see the houseless population begin to grow really across the countries, but particularly in cities where the cost of living is so exorbitant, like in Los Angeles, like in the Bay Area, like in New York, like here in DC. There's a lot of very nice places that are sitting empty. And I know there are some radical groups across the country that are starting to organize for mass squatting, right? Like it's time to start seizing shit, everybody. Like we can't wait for these politicians, because if we wait for the politicians, we're going to die of starvation, die of exposure from not being housed, die of not having access to healthcare. Like it's time to start with some guerrilla tactics. And if it means that we have to start squatting, maybe B&E, breaking and entering into some places that we know sit empty, because especially in big places like New York and the big cities, et cetera, a lot of times there's a lot of foreign investors, real estate speculators that buy these homes, that buy these condos, and they sit empty for 11 months out the year. Like, and our government obviously is not going to take their surplus COVID money like they should have and started to purchase housing for unhoused people. No, they continue to give tax breaks and everything, giveaways to the developers, but they do nothing for the people. So I think it's incumbent upon us, like in the ways that we have to organize with each other and say things surreptitiously, even though I said that aloud out here, but I just wanted to put it out there. Like it's time for us to get creative, to get forceful, and make sure people's bail funds are replenished, because people are going to be incarcerated for their actions that they take, but they can't arrest us all. They can't arrest every squatter that's occupying an empty unit in a big city. So I think it's time for us to start thinking outside of the box and doing what needs to be done, because the elected officials and the politicians have made it very clear that they don't care about us and our livelihoods.
Yep.
Agreed.
Yep.
Well, any final thoughts from the panel before we head out?
Oh, there's some Atlanta forest defenders they're trying to chop down the forest to build a police training compound, because we need more of that. Just, be on the lookout for them. They've got funds going usually and things like that. There's always a cause, but there's so much going on. Like there's so much going on, and as long as we understand that we are all on the same side, the easier it's going to be for us to kind of get past it, and really take hold of our futures as we need to.
Yeah.
Zainab?
Well, I've been thinking, for one thing, we were talking about the housing thing. 18% of the homes that are purchased now are purchased by corporations. That's up 92%. So this has never happened before in history, except for in 2008. And then all those homes sat empty and basically degraded because they were stupid, but they made a ton of money off of it. And then now they're reselling them, but they're not selling them to us. But anyway, and the credit scores are a whole other thing. But as far as helping each other, I'm between jobs right now. And I put in applications, either I'm overqualified or I'm competing with like 500 people. I tried to get a job at Walmart. I tried to get a job at Kroger. I'm trying to get a job. And then they're like, you've got a college education. You won't stay here long. I'm like, no, I just need a job. I will work at a gas station right now. Just give me a job so I can feed my family, But I go to my mom's house and she knows that I'm low on money, and she starts going through her cabinets. She doesn't have anything hardly. And she says, here, I've got some oats, Zaina. She's got a huge garden planted. She only lives on an 18th of an acre, and she's growing veggies. She's like, as soon as the cucumbers come in, we'll make ourselves some pickles. Here's some tomatoes. We need to teach each other how to garden. We need to teach people from rural areas, bring food into the city if you've got too much, because there's food deserts throughout this country. Grow it in your front yard, grow it in your backyard. Millennials don't know how to grow things. We don't know how to can. That's how us Appalachians lived. We lived off canning. We lived off growing veggies because we were poor. We lived off hunting, honestly. Fishing. We need to start learning that again, unfortunately, and we need to come together like that. Just help each other. Don't give money to Planned Parenthood. Call a sister up and drive her where she needs to go. That's what we need to do, because Planned Parenthood, they're just going to endorse candidates. Don't give any money to these endorsing agencies. Don't give any money to research who you're giving your funds to. Go and volunteer your time. Grow produce if you can and give it to your neighbors. That's how I think we can. And then as Kim Brown always says, let's raise some hell and get it done. But that, of course, on top of it. But in the meantime, while we're doing that, we still have to survive. And I honestly think it's just going to be us loving each other and coming together and actually talking to our neighbors again.
Well said. Kim? Final thoughts.
Yes, I want us to all please keep the family and the memory of Jalen Walker in our hearts this weekend, the young man who was shot 60 times in Akron, Ohio. And let that be a reminder. Unfortunately, this police violence is a constant reminder that we live in a police state, that chances are wherever you live, the police are sucking up an overwhelming majority of public funds, of public resources. We are housing insecure, we are food insecure, but the police don't lack for money. They don't lack for equipment. They don't lack for funds for quote unquote training, right? And this is a policy issue that everybody needs to get behind. Do not believe the Democratic rhetoric about defund the police is a catchy slogan, or even that it's a poison pill for any potential candidates. No, this is a demand. This is a survival demand that we are making. We're not even asking. We are telling them that the police need to be defunded and abolished. And anytime that the police have enough resources and manpower and just audacity to shoot a fleeing person 60 times, that is a system that cannot be reformed. That is a system that does not want to be reformed. That is a system that refuses to be reformed. So let's delete reform the police out of our vocabulary, right? And it ties into inflation because all the funds of the police disproportionately use from the public till can be redistributed into areas in which that can help people survive this ongoing pandemic, this housing crisis, this food crisis that we find ourselves in. We're about to be in a recession by our own doing, right? By the US government policy decisions own doing. And one way that we can try to, I guess, make that less painful is to demand that the police give up all the monies, all the tens of billions of dollars that they're about to be receiving, and make sure that Joe Biden knows how you feel.
Well said. Where can everyone find you? Delilah, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I have a website, delilahfortexas.com. I'm just in Texas. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. And yeah, I'll be out here. Y'all take care.
Kim?
You can find me at Burn It Down with Kim Brown on YouTube. Please go over there and subscribe to the channel. We're on Twitter at Burn It Down KB and BIDWKB, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. That's where we live on the internet.
And Zainab?
You can find me at Zainab Day on Twitter, and I am going to do some journalism again just for the hell of it, and so you may see some pieces start coming out over the next couple months. So
Awesome. Guys, just a reminder, hit that like button. That really helps with the algorithm. Also, another reminder, I'm actually taking tomorrow off. It's holiday, so I won't be here tomorrow night, but I'll be back Tuesday night with more stories. Thank you all so much. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Sabby. Thank you for having us.
Sabby.
Happy, unhappy 4th. I don't know what to say the 4th of July. Burn a flag or two this weekend, gang. See y'all later.
Bye.
Bye.